Let's pay a visit to Mark's True Crime Corner.
This is not a good neighborhood. I'm scared.
Now, here's your host, Mark Thompson.
Today, we are going to talk about the murder of Martha Puebla, but it is also the story of Juan Catalan. So Martha Puebla was 16 years old, and she was at home, and someone was murdered outside of her house. Her friend had come to get her at 2 o'clock in the morning so they could, quote, go out, end quote. And as her friend Sophie was at her window trying to get Martha to leave the house, Sophie's boyfriend was murdered in his car as he waited for them. This all happened in the year of 2003. So the police discover that there are two men that killed this boyfriend. His name was Christian Vargas, that was sitting outside of the home of Martha Puebla. One was Jose Ledesma, and then the other was Mario Catalan, who is the brother of the person that we just mentioned, and the story is about Juan. So Martha becomes an eyewitness of sorts to this murder of Christian that happened outside of her house. But she knows who did it. If you go down to visuals, Tony, I can show, she knows that it was, if you go down one more, if you go that, thank you. So she knows that it was the Vineland Boys. Now, this was a gang in North Hollywood this gang was formed by two high school students in 1988. Yep, man. And they defected from a street gang called 18th Street Gang, and they started this gang. And they were known to be particularly violent because they were sort of a newer street gang and somewhat, as I read, alleged, proving themselves of sorts. So the Vineland Boys, they kill this young kid, Christian Vargas, outside of the window of Martha Puebla. The police come, they interview Martha Puebla, and they have her as an eyewitness on the stand. But when she is on the stand as an eyewitness, she says, I did not see the murderer, because she knows if she is considered a rat, she will lose her life.
Yeah.
And so what the police did, if you go down, Tony, for the visuals, is they got a sketch of who this person was. So this is allegedly the person who murdered Christian Vargas. This was a sketch of, I think, a composite of both Sophie and Martha's account of the killer.
Yeah, based on the two descriptions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But if you go down, so the police took what they call as a six-pack. So it's a visual of 6 individuals who look like that sketch. And then they circled this person here at the bottom in the middle. That is Juan Catalan. And they put MP here, Martha Puebla, and then they wrote, this is the person who murdered her friend's boyfriend. You can see that all, if you're watching, in the visual. That was all done by the police. Martha never said any of that. And you know what? It is that got Martha killed.
So the police, again, just to put a point on it, they phonied this up. They had the 6-pack, but then they circled this as having been positively ID'd by Martha. And as you say, because that word got out that Martha identified this guy.
Yep.
That she was talking to the cops is the idea.
Talking to the cops.
And they knew that she was talking to the gang did, and they killed her.
Yes. So the cops.
But the guy circled didn't kill her.
Didn't kill her. So if you go down, this is Juan Catalan. So his brother there were 2 men that killed Christian Vargas. His brother was an accomplice to that. And so it was alleged that Juan went and murdered Martha 11 days after the initial eyewitness testimony in defense of his brother Mario. But Juan never did. And suddenly it became a he said, they said sort of situation between the police and Juan. And he was desperate to find an alibi that would show that he did not kill Martha. And Martha was murdered outside of her house 11 days after the eyewitness testimony in May of 2013. A man came up to her, said, "Who are you?" She said, "I'm Martha, you know me." And he shot her multiple times and she was killed.
16 years old.
16 years old. Juan Catalan, who you're looking at now, is 19 when all of this happens. So the police go to Juan. They show him that 6-pack. They say that you have been positively identified by an eyewitness, Martha Puebla. And so we we are coming to arrest you. And so they do. And he goes to trial. He finds an attorney named Todd Melnick. If you go down, it's really interesting. If you go to Todd's website, he's got like all the Netflix and everything up.
Now he's very famous.
Now he's really famous. But I will say, and we talked about this last night, he took on this case before Larry David and HBO were ever a part of this.
Yeah, so later in the case, for those who don't know, Larry David and HBO become part of it, and the show Curb Your Enthusiasm. But more to the point, he just, as it was represented anyway, he just said, it just doesn't make sense. This guy didn't do this, and so I decided to take it. And you know he's not making any money. This guy doesn't have any money to pay Todd Melnick, but Todd took the case pro bono.
Yep. So, Todd takes the case and he's asking Juan, did anything happen that night? Like, where were you? What did you do that night?
What's your alibi? Where were you? So if you didn't do this, where can we put you somewhere else that would make it impossible for you to have been the killer?
And it's Todd's girlfriend that reminds him, you were at the Dodger game. You had 4 tickets. You took 2 friends. One was a cousin. And you took your daughter. And you went to the Dodgers game. And there was not, like, it was sort of nondescript, right? It was like, we went to the game, I bought my daughter some candy and some food and some water, and then we bought playing cards or whatever for the Dodgers, or baseball cards for the Dodgers, and we left. But Juan soon remembers that there was a camera crew at that Dodgers game where they played the Atlanta Braves. And that camera crew was not a crew that was capturing content for any sort of sports outlet. It was a different camera crew. And so he mentions that. And Todd Melnick goes to the communications office for the Dodgers and starts to ask who was filming on that night. And he talks about, in the show that we watched, or the documentary, flipping through the appointment book, if you will, of the Dodgers. And it's blank page, blank page, blank page. And then that night, which was May 12th, 2013, sure enough, there is a production company that shot at that game. He doesn't know it's HBO. He has a production company name and a telephone number. And when he calls that telephone number, the person on the other end says HBO. So he talks to what was the producers of Curb Your Enthusiasm. And yes, they were there shooting an episode of the show, which I will mention is called The Carpool Lane. And Variety rated it as the 7th best episode ever of Curb Your Enthusiasm. It's very funny. The premise is, or the storyline is, Larry David is very late to attend a Dodgers game. And there's a ton of Los Angeles traffic, as there would be. And so he picks up a lady of the night who approaches his car. And she becomes his passenger so that he can drive in the carpool lane, which has no traffic. And it's very funny. And he takes her to the game. And there they are enjoying the game. Now, there's 53,000 people at this game, 53,000. And they happen to be shooting in 2 different aisles of all of the aisles in the entire Dodger Stadium. And one of those aisles was where Juan Catalan was sitting. So if you could believe it, Larry David is walking up and down the aisle. He's going down to a friend who has much better seats than him. That's part of the storyline and the comedy of the show, is that he's got these terrible seats and he's sitting with a lady of the night. And sure enough, on the cameras, they capture Juan Catalan with his daughter. And this is the exact shot. Now, during production and when they were shooting, no one was allowed to walk up and down the aisle because Larry David was walking up and down the aisle during those shots. But a somewhat absent-minded PA allowed Juan Catalan to walk into the shot with his daughter, probably because his daughter was 6 years old and wanted to sit down.
Yeah,
and
he held him initially, apparently, but then he sort of said, just go ahead. And that is Juan and his daughter right there.
That is Juan and his daughter.
In the shot that actually lived on Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Yep, it is. And so if you go down, you can actually see them circled in the crowd. Now, what's great about this footage is that you can see at the bottom, there's a timestamp. So it proved not only that Juan Catalan was at the game that night, but in fact the time in which he was at the game that night.
Yeah, that time code, TCR 903. So that's time code is then linked to real time.
Yes.
Which is why then that becomes a timestamp that's important.
Yeah. Now they take this to the trial.
They think this is it.
Pre-trial. It's pre-trial. And
when you're watching, you're thinking, this is it. I mean, this absolutely corroborates the fact that he was at the Dodgers game and couldn't possibly kill this person. But the zeal of the prosecution is what plays next, which is, that doesn't mean you couldn't kill him.
Yeah.
It's 9 o'clock now, but in this shot, but the person wasn't killed until after 10.
Exactly. And so then what Todd Melnick does, who's the attorney that we were talking about earlier, the defense attorney for Juan Catalan, he remembers that in the O.J. Simpson trial, which he was watching and I think providing commentary around, they used cell phone pings to provide his location. So it is, in fact, a cell phone call from Juan's girlfriend to Juan, placing him at the Dodger Stadium at 10:12, that in fact makes it impossible for him to have been in the area at the exact time in which Martha Puebla was killed. And so the combination of the video footage and the phone call make it so that he is not taken to trial for this case. Yeah.
I mean, it's a remarkable thing.
You know what's also really interesting is his cousin who went to the game with him lived down the street from Martha. So actually 15 minutes after she was killed, he was in that area dropping off his cousin. The whole thing is crazy. It is a remarkable story. That is Juan Catalan with his attorney, Todd Melnick, with the footage that got him off of this case. And the interviews with Larry David are funny. It's funny. This feels like it could be a storyline on Curb Your Enthusiasm. Also because Juan Catalan had no idea who Larry David was, no idea what Curb Your Enthusiasm was.
Neither one of these guys knew Larry David or Curb Your Enthusiasm. It's remarkable because we think, oh, Larry David, Curb Your Enthusiasm, he's a huge star. But both of them said, yeah, I didn't know him. I mean, Juan, I understand. I mean, maybe not. But Todd Melnick, I would have thought would know it. Just it's like that kind of, it would have filtered into his circles. Now, there is another part of this. I mean, this is a remarkable thing. I mean, it's a miracle. And as is noted, you know, if he's not in Curb Your Enthusiasm in this weird way, if he's not captured by cameras, then he's probably... I wouldn't say probably. He's going to be found guilty because of the zeal of a prosecution that is buoyed by, honestly, the misdeeds of the cops. I mean, the detectives.
If you go down, Tony, a couple of visuals for anybody who's watching. I have pictures of the two detectives who... fraudulently circled Juan Catalan's photo in that six-pack, which not only put Juan Catalan potentially on trial for this case, and he was in jail for 6 months, or prison, I should say, but it also was the reason that Martha Puebla was killed.
Yeah, I mean, there's some blood on the hands of these guys, and I understand how difficult detective work. I mean, I understand in theory anyway how difficult it is, but this is just so way out of bounds. And you do, in the documentary, hear from these guys, and they go, "Yeah, well, I admit that was a false." They admit under oath. They don't admit in some interview. They admit under oath that it was a falsehood, and that it was a lie. That they circled that picture, and the whole thing was built on a lie.
They could build, if you go up, Tony, a little bit, there's a sketch, and then there's Juan Catalan, and then there's Jose Ledesma, and Jose Ledesma is the one that put the hit out on Martha and is the one who killed Christian Vargas, who we were talking about with the initial murder. And you can see the resemblance.
Sure.
But they manufactured this story because there was enough circumstantial evidence to prosecute Juan. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that Mario was an accessory to Jose.
Was his brother.
And that was his brother.
When you say Mario.
Yeah, Mario Catalan.
Yeah. Right. And that might have, been enough. But it's it's a remarkable story for the one in a million quality that, or as I believe it was John Watson who said it was one in a million. Thank you very much for that.
Yeah. And apparently Juan Catalan bought the DVD set of Curb Your Enthusiasm after he got off. Yeah.
It's just terrific.
And so, but it's a really fascinating story and certainly a really crazy situation that freed a man. Yeah, and saved his life.
That's the documentary. It's called Long Shot. It's been out there for a little while. It's on Netflix. We really enjoyed it. It's short, which I also like. It's like I turned to Courtney at one point, and they're in the middle of talking to the detectives, I think, or to the lawyer. And I thought, you know what? If this were one of these new true crime things, I'd be in episode 4 right now before I get to this. I mean, they just drag the story out. And I just loved how taut this was. It was really good.
No, and when I was constructing how to tell this story, there's less coverage on Martha and the initial murder of Christian Vargas, which makes sense because the documentary is about Juan and what happened. But it really was. It was really done well. And they interviewed all of the stars of that particular episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm, and Larry David shows up as only Larry David could in those interviews. So.
This is true when it comes to the cops trying to get the prosecutions and convictions. Cops and prosecutors are scored, in quotes, on number of convictions. Make the numbers police quotas, says Mark Petrie. I mean, there's truth to this, that there's a premium on getting these convictions. And that's why you get the zealous prosecutor who's overzealous in certain instances.
I will add this, and I will caveat it as alleged. I have no evidence. I'm just mentioning this because it came up in my research. This gang, the Vineland Boys, had killed a Los Angeles police officer earlier in the year of 2003 or the end of 2002. I don't know if that also fueled their interest in this case because the Vineland Boys were part of it. But there certainly was a lot going on.
But Juan wasn't a member of the Vineland Boys.
But he wasn't a member of the Vineland Boys.
So it's like, why don't you go after a member of the Vineland Boys? And with that description, you could go after a lot of them because that was a very familiar face based on that description and sort of a generic
if you read
sketch.
It's like, it's a very generic eyewitness account of who killed Christian Vargas.
I was moved by this story, and it's a fascinating story. And finally, a court works to exonerate someone. But because of the way in which it was handled initially, someone is dead. The 16-year-old is dead, right? This
16-year-old Martha Puebla is dead. And that did not need to happen. It was completely manufactured by the cops. When she went on as an eyewitness into a pre-trial of Jose Ledesma, she in fact said, "I did not see the shooter," because she knew what would happen. Yes.
Courtney, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, love that.
Thank you for watching this with me last night.
Of course.
It was great. I mean, it was well done.
That is True Crime Corner for today.
Yeah.
True Crime Corner, only on The Mark Thompson Show.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.